Hello, everybody, and welcome again to another episode of the Risk Matrix. This is the last episode of Season 3. James, Season 3. And in a few weeks, we'll be starting Season 4, baby.
4, baby. 4, baby. How about that?
Let me introduce us again, James. I got so excited about the end of the season and the beginning of the next. I'm Dr. Martin, and this is Mr. James Junkin, and we're the Risk Matrix. Today, we're going to talk about a few things, but we're going to start with ripped from the headlines. James, I'm going to let you take it away.
Ripped from the headlines, indeed. OSHA cites construction contractor with seven willful, 33 repeat violations after fatal trench collapse.
That's crazy.
You know what? Willful plus dead employee equals criminal.
It does equal criminal.
Okay? A lot of people don't understand that, but if you have in the federal system, OSHA will make a referral or can make a referral if there is a fatality and a willful citation tied to it. Someone dies, they can refer to the Department of Justice for criminal prosecution. That's at the federal level. Remember, just because the feds don't act, don't mean the state will not act. Okay?
And I'm going to say, James, I don't know about in your neck of the woods, but out here in Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island, they love to take it criminal. The states will take it criminal if there's a death, a fatality on your site.
So a little bit of details here. The U.S. Department of Labor has cited a Massachusetts-based water and sewer line construction contractor for willfully and repeatedly exposing workers to safety hazards in a trench collapse in November the 25th, claiming the life of an employee and seriously injuring another. The investigation found that workers were removing sandy soil and installing steel plates outside of a trench. While working, the backfield saying collapse trapped 2 workers inside the trench. 1 worker was engulfed and sustained fatal injuries. The agency cited the employer with 7 willful citations, 33 repeat, and 17 serious violations for failing to provide workers with a safe way to exit the trench, lack of adequate cave-in, sound familiar?
Yeah.
Having unsupported underground utilities, soil piles within 2 feet of an excavation, neglecting to install shoring system per the design, not using or using a damaged protective system, so it must mean the trench box was damaged, and exposing employees to numerous electrical and fall hazards. And here they were assessed $4.6, almost $4.7 million. And what's shocking is for you to have 33 repeat, that means there was 33 other times.
There were 33 other times that you signed off that you abated.
Absolutely. So 7 willful, 33 repeat, and 17 serious. So what's the math on that? 47, let's see, that'd be 57 citations.
Yeah, that was a pretty big thing out here in the Northeast, and we've had several trench collapses in Massachusetts and Connecticut over the last year even. So this is a big thing, and it kind of leads us into our topic for today, which is the heavy cost of dirt, which comes from one of the articles that I posted on LinkedIn. Not sure if you guys know about this, but both James and I have newsletters on LinkedIn. We post regularly. We often don't post the same things. Sometimes we post the same things with a different take or an additional take. So, if you're interested, go ahead and take a look on our LinkedIn. But one of the articles that I put out recently, probably last month, I think, was the heavy cost of dirt. So let me just start this off and say, it's kind of a play on words here, because dirt, actually, people don't think about this, but a yard of dirt weighs anywhere between 1,100 pounds and 3,000 pounds, right? And that depends that depends on whether or not it's wet, it's loam, it's gravel, etc., right? But
Right.
roughly about 2,000 to 2,200 for dry topsoil is about right, right? So not only is dirt heavy, right? You don't want it to collapse on top of you, but it leads us to what James just talked about is that dirt moving and excavation and all those things come with a heavy price when you make mistakes, right? So part of this is to not make mistakes, okay? And not making mistakes, we can start off with the OSHA regulations, which state what, James?
Well, first of all, you need a competent person, okay? Competent person. There used to be this funny video that's not so funny, but it was funny at the time, called Oregon OSHA, right? And Oregon OSHA comes out. Many of you've seen it. They're at an excavation and they're like, "Who's in charge today?" And everybody's looking at, who's in charge today? And he asks, "How are you going to get him out?" And they're all looking at him, say, "How are you going to get him out?" And what happens? The whole side of the excavation caves in. The workers hanging, luckily, by a pipe. And the guy from Oregon OSHA standing there saying, see what I was saying? You need to get him out now. And I hope you get him out quickly and safely. What's the point? He wanted to know who the competent person was because OSHA requires you to have a competent person who has inspected that excavation, who has the ability to identify existing and predictable hazards, and has the authority to take prompt corrective action. If they don't have the authority to fix the problem, at least stop the job, then they're not the competent person, right? And so what happens, I think, when you come up to these issues and you identified no competent person is the number two thing on your list. But if we have a competent person, we don't get to the number one, which is a lack of cave-in prevention.
Yep.
This is getting really frustrating for me. I mean, how many people have to die in cave-in? This is not hard.
Yep.
First year construction folks that go for an OSHA 10 know about trenching and excavation.
It's required as part of an OSHA 10.
So, you know what I'm saying? Is that we don't know or we don't care. That company we just talked about, obviously, they don't care. They
Mhm.
don't care. But I'm struggling to think that we just don't know anymore. I think there are more people that don't care than don't know.
I would
So
agree with you.
if you have a trench or an excavation that's deeper than 5 feet, you need some way to protect your worker, whether that's sloping or benching or using some type of protective shield like a trench box. It is just amazing how many people don't
Can
understand
we
that.
can we roll back here and before we move on to like protective systems and stuff like that, let's talk a little bit about the competent person and what kind of things they need to know and need to be able to identify in order to make a decision on whether or not an excavation is safe, whether it's properly benched and sloped, what type of protection to use, right? So a couple of things, right? They need to know how to classify soil, okay, types A, B, and C,
Okay.
um, stable rock, etc., which can be visual, right? I mean, I have a lot of people that just do it visually and they classify everything as C,
Right?
easy peasy, right? Um, there are other ways to classify soil with the pocket pentrometer and other roll tests and things of that nature if you really want to get technical. But when in doubt, C's the right call, class
Use
C,
right
right?
call.
They also need to identify when water can become an issue in an excavation, right? They need to know, is groundwater gonna infiltrate? How are we gonna remove the groundwater? How are we gonna make it stable at the bottom? A lot of times people put the trench box in, but water's still coming into the excavation. We can't have that. How do we prevent and protect the workers who are going to be working in the trench box from infiltration of water and other things? What are some other things, James? Competent persons
Atmospheric
need to know.
atmospheric hazards, right? And I want to point something out because sometimes there's confusion with this, right? The standard says if it's greater than 4 feet, you have to have some means of protection, cave in protection. it it doesn't say that if it's less than 5 feet or 4 feet that you don't. It says the competent person then has to determine if it's necessary. So there's a lot of responsibility on this competent person. If it's less than 5 feet, the competent person gets to determine whether you need cave-in protection or not. The competent person has to determine what the hazards are and identify when the controls are failing and we need to get out. The competent person has to go in and make sure that we have a means of exit within 25 feet of each employee, no matter where they are located in the trench or the excavation, right? This is basic OSHA 10 stuff.
So here's the crux of this, because I see this in construction. People will say the competent person is the foreman. Is the foreman on site? Because if the foreman is not on site, then the competent person can't be the foreman, right? Because if we're in the excavation or we're doing excavation or we're making decisions about the excavation, the competent person that's assigned needs to be present.
They
Present.
have to be present because it's got to be inspected after every rain event. If someone stops the job, uses their stop work authority, if there's something that comes along that affects the stability of the trench, there are a lot of things that go into being a competent person. And so that denotes a specific level of training and authority that they have. When OSHA walks up, and this is always part of a national emphasis program, right? And they come out and say, "Who's the competent person?" And you're like, you mean our supervisor?" That tells me right off the bat that these folks don't know everything they need to know when it comes to trenching and excavation.
So I will just say one of the things that I do for my clients, I probably think you probably do it for yours as well, is that we implement competent person programs, right? And we also
Right.
have forms and procedures for identifying the competent person on every job site, on every job site. And that competent person goes right in a competent person form goes right in the binder for everything under OSHA that requires a competent person. And we go through their training, we go through their education, we go through their experience, and then the company signs off on that competent person being on the site and being that person that's going to be in charge.
100%. Who deems someone competent? I see a lot of classes that say competent person excavation, competent person this, competent person that. You see online, and even some courses are being taught by reputable companies. And I'm not saying that you can't use that in your marketing, but I and Mariner Gulf cannot, or even as a Veriforce master trainer, excuse me, I can't deem you competent.
The
I can
employer.
train you. Only your company, only the employer can deem you competent, right? Because they're making that designation. You have specific authority. So it's not just the foreman. The foreman might be your competent person, but that competent person needs to be there on site. The other thing I see is a lot of people have started using work permits. There's not an OSHA required work permit for excavations. Now, I want to say this as a pet peeve of mine. If we ran a poll, we'd have a lot of people that might disagree, but an excavation is not a permit required confined space. Period. End of discussion. It is not. It has some of the characteristics of it, but OSHA is not going to cite you under the permit required confined space standard. Why? Because it has its own standard. As trenching and excavation has its own standard. Now, it has some of the characteristics of a confined space, but you're not required to run a confined space entry permit, have an attendant, all these things, standby rescue, all these things that go along with confined space, right? But I do see people transitioning because of these hazards, because we killed so many people, to having some formalized work permit beyond the JHA or JSA.
Some of my clients have ground opening permits,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is similar to a work permit for opening an excavation, right? So ground opening permit, and it calls out what we're going to do um, from what the competent person says regarding water, regarding shoring, regarding all those things, and that goes right in the binder again with everything that we're doing on site. And then there's an inspection. right? Because there's an
Right.
inspection for excavations that required, as you said, anytime it rains at the beginning of the workday, anytime conditions change, those inspections need to be documented, that they're taking place. That's a
If you
requirement of a
don't document,
competent person.
it didn't happen, right? You and I have been in enough of these informal conferences defending people who've been cited when it comes to OSHA. Some probably you more so than I around excavation, but I've had some experience with these excavations. You need to be able to prove you're implementing your safety management system. The standard doesn't say that you need documented inspections. I'm telling you, if you don't have it documented, it's hard to prove that it didn't happen, right? And so that's showing that you have some type of methodology in place where you're ensuring that inspections are being conducted, right? Without that, and that goes for anything. Case we just had related to a ladder. A lot of discussion about, do y'all really inspect ladders? Is this an anomaly? Or is this something that's systemic throughout your organization because we had a ladder that didn't get properly inspected and somebody got hurt, right? So in instances like that, if you don't have documentation, the question of whether or not this is a one-off or whether it's a systemic issue throughout your company is up in the air for the area director to decide. So document, right? And I think if you have documentation, it helps you it helps you remember to do
Yep.
things, right?
Yep.
It's a little bit more formal. But one
And
of the
that
things I
competent
found,
person should know what your policies and procedures are regarding excavations and the permit system, et cetera, because they're the ones who are going to be responsible when OSHA comes on site or when somebody inspects your job site to to call out those things that they looked at and what decisions they made.
well, I thought one of the things that was most impactful from your article is you're talking not only about the effect of lives, you've listed the number of fatalities that you've seen uh, over the past few years. You've also listed the enforcement rate is going up and OSHA's being more aggressive. The penalties are getting more. They're less forgiving in negotiating around these excavation instances. Uh, as far as, particularly if there was somebody injured or killed, uh, you're seeing not only what comes from the impacts of an OSHA citation, but I guarantee you're looking at some type of wrongful death or gross negligent claims and protracted litigation for that. There are a lot of business impacts to you from a legal standpoint. Reputationally, are you going to be able to get future work? If you're reporting to third party verification systems, your scoring is going to be heavily impacted with 35, 7 willful, 35, repeat, 7 serious. You're probably not going to work for most reputable companies anymore, right?
Right.
You're probably done.
But
Uh,
here's the kicker, right, James? We talked on the last show about the rates of smaller firms losing people to fatalities or major injuries, right? And this goes back to do they know? Yes. Do they care? I mean, I would like to hope that most employees do care whether or not they come home safe from work, right? I think that smaller employers are under pressure to make bad decisions and to not take care of their workers, especially in excavations. I mean, we just have seen a rash of these lately,
well,
especially in
this is a
excavation collapses, that they're in such a hurry to complete jobs, to competitively bid jobs, that they're taking these risks, and and it's not worth it, right? It's not worth it. The costs are immeasurable.
the other thing I look inside your article here, you just highlighted some recent fatalities. So Spur, Texas, city public works employee died in a utility trench cave in. That's December 17th, right there at Christmas. December 15th, Huntsville, Texas. Killed when a drainage ditch collapsed during early phase neighborhood construction. But that was a small company too. December 11th, Tennessee, crushed in a trench at Big Ridge State Park. Coworkers injured trying to save him. December 5th, Ohio, died in a 12-foot deep trench with unstable soil everywhere. That's a quote. November 18th, died in a 7-foot trench that lacked a safe exit route. There's no way to get out. I guess they didn't have a ladder.
So these are
August,
several in a month.
that was just in a month.
Yeah.
Let's see how many that was. That was 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 in December, 1 in November, 1 in August. We've gotten through. Here's one in July. 54-year-old male died in a 25-foot deep trench during fiber optic installation. Another one in July was killed when a water spray caused a cave-in an elementary school site, construction site. Another one in Connecticut. A lot of these are in the Northeast. June 13th, died in a 5-foot deep residential sewer line trench. Again, I think this goes back to something we talked about last time and from the news. About 50% of the people dying in construction work for companies with less than 20 employees. Now, I don't know what size companies that these folks work for, but listening at the jobs they're doing, okay, it
Yeah.
would sort of indicate at least some of these probably work for smaller
Small
companies.
jobs. Yeah. So, well,
So how do we prevent?
there's a heavy cost, right? And it's not just heavy dirt, right? It's all these things that you mentioned. It's reputational. It's future work. It's citation fines. It's litigation costs. It's civil penalties. It's all these things add up, right? And for what? And for
You
what?
know,
It's a heck of a lot cheaper to go get the trench box and put it in place than it is to lose somebody. First of all, the loss of life is precious. But beyond that, all of those other costs added up, pay for that trench box over and over and over again.
you know, I think me and you know who this one is. Maybe. A contractor faced $1.2 million in proposed fines for repeated excavation violations. After a double fatality where no trench box was present, OSHA cited the employer's, quote, plain indifference to known hazards. What's a jury going to think about that? If it gets that far, probably plea it out in a criminal case. But local district attorneys are becoming more and more involved in the prosecution of these type of incidents and not just waiting for OSHA to cite a willful and refer it to the Department of Justice. States can prosecute. Local district attorneys can prosecute. They can pursue manslaughter charges. They can pursue criminally negligent homicide charges against owners and direct supervisors.
That's
Okay.
right.
Now, a lot of times what I find is our frontline supervisors don't understand that they can be held criminally responsible, meaning they can go to jail too. Okay.
That's right. And they have. I
Right.
mean, in a couple
And
of
they have.
cases in the last
And they
several
have.
years out here in the Northeast, there have been people who have been given criminal penalties, right? Jail time, uh, and fines. And
And
for what?
if you get on that severe violator enforcement program as a company, you're going to change or you're going to go out of business. One, two things going to happen because OSHA can come back at any time and conduct follow-up inspections. And you know what this really it really makes me upset because I go with these companies. You go with these companies to these informal conferences, and most of them want to do the right thing. Most of them want to fix it. Most of them don't want their employees to get hurt. And we come to some reasonable resolution with OSHA, and we settle the case in something that's beneficial to not only OSHA, but also to the company.
And they make the
And they
abatement.
sign the certificates of abatement and they get another chance and then turn around and don't fix it. And it ends up getting people killed. So if you
Yeah,
don't know, you don't care. And I used to say, a lot of people don't know, but I've been doing this a long time. I think there's just a lot of people that don't care.
yeah.
They don't
Well, I
care.
mean, I've had an equal amount of clients that come in and think they're getting picked on, right? Why is OSHA picking on me? And it's like, it's the simplest of things. I mean, it can't. Some of these things can't get more simple. I will agree that some regulations are complex, but most are, and I think you probably would agree with this. Most are just simple common sense and fair. Many of the regulations are very fair. In fact, they could be much more strict, and they're not for several reasons, which we won't get into today. But you know, eh, I don't think OSHA asks a whole lot, especially in some of these cases where people are dying. Um,
I mean,
it's
in the
simple.
ones we just had, we don't need a new system. We don't need a new SIF program. We don't, you know what we need people to do? The simplest things. Get the soil pile beyond 2 feet. Put
Actually,
in a tree box. Don't put people down there when it's full of water. I mean, hell, how much more simple can we make it? We're gonna have to put some people in jail. I mean, I'm all for these new programs because sometimes they're complex issues and we need to look at it. This is simple stuff.
that's right.
Things you learn in OSHA 10. If you don't know or you don't care. And I got training records out the yin yang that say you knew. So I'm
That's
all
right.
for putting some people in jail. I know a lot of people that wasn't very happy with OSHA and their, blame and shame strategy a few years ago. And I get some of that. But man, when we've got companies out there with 7 willful, 33 repeats, that's telling me that they were cited previously 33 times for the same damn thing.
And they just don't care.
Put those people in jail. You can't fix that. There's no safety management system for I don't care. And
Amen.
hopefully nobody, any of our listeners to love, end up working for organizations like that. And if you do work for an organization like that, get on the phone, 1-800-321-OSHA, because it might save somebody's life. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide. Roll Tide. On that note, James, I think we've taken this one to its logical conclusion. If you
You
want to
got me
look at that
fired up.
article, you can look me up on LinkedIn. I have a newsletter, and James also has a newsletter. So look us up on LinkedIn. We put stuff like this out all the time. There's some valuable information in there. I'm trying not to toot my own horn, but I like to put out stuff that people are interested in, that makes them think, and maybe change the way that they look at some of the things on their job sites, in their workplaces. And again, we both have those. Go and check us out on LinkedIn. James, you want to
Hey,
click us out?
yeah, one other place, Veriforce's blogs are a great place. A lot of our articles end up there. Articles from other members of the Veriforce team there demonstrating some thought leadership. Outstanding place to go as well. Check that out. We're always trying to push the envelope to fulfill our shared mission of getting workers home safe from high hazard jobs. That's what it's all about, baby, right there.
Yeah, that's
Getting
right.
people home,
That's
right?
right.
Getting people home. But thank y'all. This is our last episode for season 3.
Season 3.
Three's in the book. Three's in the books. Thank you for all of you that have made this possible. We appreciate the support. We appreciate the kind words, the likes, the shares. And hey, until next time, y'all keep bringing those workers home safe from those high hazard jobs. We'll see you over the hump in season 4. Roll Tide, baby. We're out.
Roll Tide.
Vacation.